You're not ready. Not for a blackout. Not for hour 1. And definitely not for hour 24. In America, over 220 million people rely on electricity just to get clean water. 93% have no backup heat. 81% have less than 3 days of food. And when the lights go out, looting begins in under 8 hours. Every time. This isn't a maybe. This is math. And you're already behind. Here are the 7 deadly mistakes that most Americans will make in the first 24 hours of a blackout. And the first one could kill you by nightfall. 7. Trusting your tap water. Most Americans have no idea, zero, that their tap water is on life support from the electrical grid. You think it's just water, right? Always there, always flowing. Cold and clean. But behind that faucet is a symphony of high-powered pumps, UV sterilizers, chlorine injectors, and pressure systems, all run on electricity. And when the power goes down, that symphony flatlines. In most cities, the moment the electricity fails, the entire water infrastructure is on a ticking clock. Some municipal reservoirs might last 12 to 24 hours, tops, before the pressure drops so low that contamination from sewage lines, groundwater, and even backflow from people's own pipes starts creeping in. In Houston, after Hurricane Harvey, dozens of neighborhoods were under boil water notices within hours, not days, of the blackout. And in Flint, Michigan, people drank contaminated water for months, and that was with power on. Now imagine no power, no filtration, no backup, and no warning. The CDC has already admitted that 68% of U.S. water utilities don't have sufficient backup power to run their pumps and disinfectant systems in a prolonged outage. That means if you're trusting your tap, you're gambling with Giardia, E. coli, Cryptosporidium, and a dozen other microscopic nightmares that could have you vomiting, dehydrated, and hospitalized in less than 48 hours. That's how fast it happens. One glass of post-blackout water could turn your blackout into a medical emergency, during a time when hospitals are also down and ambulances aren't coming. You think the power outage is your problem? It's not. Your real problem is what happens when water becomes your enemy. And here's the kicker. Most Americans don't even store a single gallon of backup drinking water. FEMA recommends 1 gallon per person per day, for 2 weeks. But let's be honest, how many families actually have 14 gallons per person stocked in their homes right now? Almost none. If the power goes out tonight, half the country would be drinking out of their toilets by Friday. So no, the mistake isn't the blackout. The mistake is believing you can treat your faucet like it didn't just become a liability. 6. Assuming the grid is coming back tomorrow. Here's what no one wants to admit out loud. We've built a society that can't survive without electricity, but the systems we rely on to deliver that electricity are decades past their expiration date. You lose power in the first 24 hours and you think, it'll be back by morning. That mindset? That's how people get caught flat-footed. That's how people starve. That's how people die. Because when you assume this is temporary, you don't take real action. You don't ration. You don't protect your fuel. You don't call your relatives. You just wait. And waiting is deadly. The U.S. grid isn't some bulletproof system. It's a patchwork mess. According to the Department of Energy, 70% of transmission lines and transformers are over 30 years old. And many of them were designed in the 1950s. That's right. Your grid is older than your dad. In fact, the American Society of Civil Engineers gave the U.S. energy infrastructure a D+ grade in its most recent report card. Let that sink in. The most powerful nation in the world is running its critical infrastructure on rusted-out tech that can't even handle a snowstorm in Texas without collapsing. And when it collapses, recovery isn't measured in minutes, it's measured in weeks or even months. The 2021 Texas blackout lasted only a few days, but it killed 246 people. And that's in a modern U.S. state with helicopters and FEMA on speed dial. Now imagine a coordinated cyber attack, like the one simulated in GridX military exercises, where multiple substations are disabled across multiple states. The Department of Homeland Security already warned in 2023 that a well-timed cyber attack could incapacitate entire regions for several weeks. But people still cling to the idea that the linemen will show up tomorrow, that the lights will blink back on, that the fridge will hum to life, that the credit cards will start working again. It's denial. And denial is how you go from citizen to refugee in 48 hours. Your mindset in that first 24-hour window determines if you're a survivor or a statistic. 5. Broadcasting your vulnerability. Now this one right here, this is where things get ugly. The moment the lights go out, you need to stop thinking like it's 2019 and start thinking like it's 1999 in Bosnia. Because the first 24 hours of a blackout aren't just about food and water. They're about information and how much of it you're giving away. You post on social media that your neighborhood's down, that you're scared, that you don't know what to do. Congratulations, you just told thousands of strangers that your home is dark, unprotected, and panicked. You're now a glowing dot on someone else's map. After Hurricane Katrina, law enforcement in New Orleans documented a 300% increase in home invasions within the first 72 hours of the blackout. Not weeks, hours. Why? Because looters and criminals prey on visibility. They look for signs. Lights on, almost skip it. Lights off, garage open, dog barking, family huddled by candlelight. That's a target. In 2020, during the California blackouts, police in Los Angeles reported that criminals were using drone surveillance to identify homes running loud generators because they knew those homes had fuel, food, and potentially firearms. If you've got your generator blasting, your windows glowing, or your family yelling outside for help, you're not surviving, you're signaling. And in a high-stress, low-security environment, the line between neighbor and threat is thinner than most people want to believe. According to a 2022 report from the National Preparedness Leadership Initiative, 70% of Americans don't even have 3 days of food stored. What happens when they get hungry on day 2 and they remember your house had smoke from the chimney? That's not a theoretical scenario. That's exactly how neighbors turned on each other during the Puerto Rico blackout in 2017. Your biggest mistake in the first 24 hours? Not understanding that silence is safety. That blackout isn't just about what's not working. It's about what you let others see. Because in the dark, people aren't looking for friendship. They're looking for advantage. And if you're broadcasting your vulnerability, you just made their job easier. 4. Burning through your battery. Like it's just another snow day. You ever notice how the second the lights go out, everyone in the house becomes magnetically attached to their phone? TikTok, Instagram, news alerts, group chats filled with, "Hey, do you guys have power?" It feels harmless, like some nervous tick to pass the time until the power magically clicks back on. But here's the problem. You're burning through your most valuable post-blackout asset, your battery-powered lifeline, as if you're still living in a first-world country that has its act together. Spoiler alert, you're not. Not when the grid is dead. Here's what most Americans don't understand. Once the cell towers lose grid power, they switch to backup generators or battery backups. And guess what? Most of those only last 4 to 8 hours. According to a 2023 report from the FCC, over 40% of U.S. cell towers don't have any long-term backup solution, which means your signal is already dying. You just don't know it yet. And if everyone in your neighborhood is live streaming the apocalypse, refreshing weather apps, or video calling Aunt Karen in Boise, the network gets slammed. Bandwidth collapses. Even towers with power can't keep up. That one YouTube video your kid watches before bed might be the reason your emergency alert doesn't come through tomorrow. But let's pretend somehow you still have signal. Guess what's next to die? Your own phone. How many Americans do you think have a charged battery bank in their home right now? Not plugged in, charged, ready to go. The answer, according to the National Energy Preparedness Survey, is less than 17%. Most folks have a dead power bank tossed in a drawer, somewhere between the loose screws and expired batteries. You know what that means? It means that flashlight app you're using to navigate the hallway just cost you 4% of your lifeline. That one quick text to check on your cousin? Another 3%. And when your phone dies, it's not just a device. It's your GPS, your weather radar, your emergency scanner, your access to FEMA alerts, to city updates, to maps, to resources, to safety. It's also your last chance to make that one critical call, the one that might save a life. So no, watching Netflix in the dark just to kill time isn't innocent, it's suicidal. If you're not rationing your battery like it's bottled oxygen in a burning building, you're not surviving. You're scrolling your way straight into silence. 3. Thinking your neighborhood won't turn on you. One of the deadliest assumptions you can make in the first 24 hours of a blackout is thinking your neighborhood is immune. That just because you know your neighbors' names, waved to them at the last barbecue, or babysat their dog one weekend, they're going to act like it's still a normal Thursday. I hate to break this to you, but when the power dies, the masks come off. Fast. Because the truth is, most American communities are held together by convenience, not loyalty. The second, food, heat, and safety are threatened. The polite social contracts vanish like steam off a pot. You want proof? Look at what happened in New York City during the blackout of 1977. In a single night without power, over 1,600 stores were looted, and more than 1,000 fires were set. This wasn't some Mad Max war zone. It was working-class neighborhoods turning on each other when the lights went out. And that was decades ago, before the internet, before social fragmentation, before the me-first culture went full throttle. Today, Americans are more polarized, less community-oriented, and more desperate than ever. According to a Pew Research study in 2024, only 28% of Americans say they even know their neighbors well. That means you've got a 72% chance that the guy living next to you is a stranger with unknown morals, and possibly a gun. Speaking of guns, let's talk real numbers. The U.S. is the most heavily armed civilian population on Earth. As of 2023, there are over 393 million privately owned firearms in circulation. That's more guns than people. And in a blackout, every one of those is a potential tool of defense or aggression. If your neighbor thinks you've got what he needs to keep his kids fed, warm, or safe, that handshake you once shared over a lawnmower repair won't stop him from kicking in your back door, especially when law enforcement isn't coming. During the 2021 Texas freeze, emergency response times ballooned to over 10 hours in some areas, and police publicly admitted they had to triage calls and ignore property crimes. Still think your street is safe? The biggest mistake isn't chaos. It's thinking that normalcy still exists, because in a blackout your neighborhood doesn't default to community. It defaults to conflict. The rule of law flickers out with the streetlights, and all that's left is who has what, and who wants it more. 2. Underestimating the mental collapse. Here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. Most Americans are emotionally and psychologically incapable of handling a blackout that lasts longer than 24 hours. We're not talking about your gear anymore. We're not talking about your canned beans or solar charger. We're talking about you, your brain, your body, your stress response. Because once that power dies, your entire nervous system gets yanked out of its comfort zone and tossed into primitive survival mode. And most people don't even know what that feels like, let alone how to handle it. Let me hit you with some science. According to a 2023 survey by the American Psychological Association, over 76% of Americans report experiencing high levels of chronic stress. With the grid working, at a blackout, you just removed every stabilizing element they rely on. Lights, noise, connection, routine. In psychology, that's called sensory deprivation, plus existential threat. It's not just uncomfortable, it's trauma. Your circadian rhythm collapses, your cortisol spikes, your blood pressure surges, and your critical thinking tanks. That's why in the first 24 hours of blackouts during Hurricane Ida, hospitals in Louisiana reported a 38% increase in panic attacks, heart arrhythmias, and stress-induced collapses. People break fast. You know what happens next. They start making reckless, irrational decisions. They burn all their candles in one night. They run the generator inside the garage and die of carbon monoxide poisoning. They go out for help and never come back. Or worse, they flip the switch from fear to rage. That's when you start hearing screams in the distance. That's when you see the glow of something burning that shouldn't be. That's when even good people, stable, sober, everyday Americans, start doing things they never imagined. And look, this isn't a judgment. It's biology. It's human. But it's deadly. Because you can prepare for a power outage. You can't prep your nervous system in a Walmart parking lot after the fact. If you don't start inoculating your mind against panic before the grid dies, you will become one of the liabilities, not one of the leaders. The first 24 hours aren't just about surviving your environment, they're about surviving your own mind. And most people, they lose that battle before the sun even rises. 1. Believing the government will save you. If you only remember one thing from this entire list, make it this: there is no cavalry coming, not in the way you think. Not in the way you've been led to believe your whole life. FEMA, the National Guard, the local sheriff's department. These aren't magical lifelines standing by to rescue you the moment the lights go out. They are bureaucracies, overwhelmed, underfunded, and stretched thinner than a dollar store garbage bag. And when the grid collapses, the government's first job isn't to help you, it's to protect itself. Let's be crystal clear. In a 2024 report from the Government Accountability Office, FEMA admitted that only 19% of U.S. counties meet their minimum disaster response benchmarks. That means 4 out of 5 American counties don't have the resources, training, or infrastructure to respond effectively to a major multi-day blackout. And that's assuming everything else is going fine, which it won't be. If the grid is down, 911 is jammed. Roads are flooded with stalled vehicles. Communications are down. Emergency fuel reserves are locked behind red tape. And what little help does arrive? It's triaged, prioritized, focused on hospitals, infrastructure, and supply routes, not on your neighborhood, your apartment complex, or your cul-de-sac. Need proof? Look at Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. It took FEMA 3 weeks to get basic supplies to some towns. People drank water from Superfund sites, chemically contaminated water, because they had no other choice. And that was an island the U.S. knew was vulnerable. Now imagine a cyber attack takes down the Northeast power grid, or a solar flare fries half the transformers west of the Rockies. You're on your own. And here's the most brutal part. The government knows it. That's why the Department of Homeland Security quietly recommends Americans have at least 2 weeks of food, water, and medical supplies per person. But how many public service announcements have you seen about that? Exactly. Because if they told you the truth, that you are the first responder, the last line of defense, the only hope your family has in the first 72 hours, you'd panic. The system isn't built to save individuals. It's built to protect continuity of government. That's why bunkers are stocked in D.C., not in Detroit. That's why congressmen have bug-out bags, and you have a flashlight with dead batteries. So the deadliest mistake you can make in the first 24 hours of a blackout? Waiting, hoping, believing, thinking that someone in a uniform will knock on your door with a warm blanket and a bottle of water. They won't, because they're not coming for you. And by the time you realize it, they've already passed you by.